last year you were arguing for an assault weapons ban. It does look like you changed your position on that.
I don't think I was ever arguing for assault weapons ban. But
you did. You said, quote, if we can get consensus on it, if Republicans and Democrats agree to it, and it passes Congress, I would sign it, specifically talking about an assault weapons ban. So it does look like you changed your position. Why did you change your position? And was there a legitimate reason, or is this kind of electioneering?
Yeah, I don't do electioneering. Oh, and anybody who looks at my record over 40 years, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not swayed by by the political winds, or I would have lived my life very, very differently. I've taken on very difficult issues my whole life, and I've stuck with them even when the entire world was against me. So that's not what I do. On this issue, my position and what I said is that I'm not going to take anybody's guns away. I don't think it's the right. I just don't think it's right. And particularly, my thinking on a lot of these issues evolved during COVID. So, I would say during COVID, I saw this assault on the Constitution and understand that, it's something that we really need to be worried about. And the Second Amendment is part of the Constitution. I'm a constitutionalist. What I said is that that I'm not fighting for an assault weapons ban. If both houses of Congress, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, all of a sudden came with a bill that they'd already passed, am I going to veto it on some kind of gun control measure? Some kind of assault weapons ban? Do you see that will ever happen? I don't think so.
Well, if the Democrats take Congress, they could, and it does look like the Democrats will.
But it wouldn't be bipartisan.
Yeah, like a bipartisan bill. I've always said that. So can I give you, my idea about something? You
can always just slide it forward, too.
I think the big issue that makes this such a toxic issue now is because of all the school shootings and the mass killings that involve weapons, firearms. I look at this issue the same way I do to the chronic disease epidemic, and I say to myself, why is it happening? There's been no increase in guns since 1970. I think there's been one increase in the gun per household since 1970. There's been no legislation that changed guns ownership. When I was a kid, at my schools, we had gun clubs. People brought their guns to school. Nobody was shooting children. Nobody was shooting strangers. Something happened. And when the change, and it's happening in this country, and it's not happening elsewhere in the world. Switzerland, which has comparable numbers of guns, it's like maybe half or 70% or whatever it is. The last mass shooting in Switzerland, there's guns in every house in Switzerland. It's a law that requires it. The last mass shooting in Switzerland was 21 years ago. We have one every 21 hours. So what is causing it? The guns are a covariable, but it doesn't fit.
So what is causing it?
Well, it's usually gang-on-gang violence.
No, I'm talking about school shootings, not gang-on-gang violence. What I would say is there's some kind of exposure that's happening. And, when the Columbine attacks occurred, 5 of the families sued Prozac. And ever since then, there have been studies, although this is not an issue that is studied enough, and it's not studied using federal funding. But the impact of SSRIs and benzos on the potential impact on gun violence, this is one possible thing that needs to be studied. All of those products have black box warnings on them that say that they may cause homicidal or suicidal behavior. So they have that on their labels, on their manufacturer's inserts. So obviously that should be a suspect. And the timeline, there's 120 million SSRI prescriptions every year, 120 million benzo prescriptions, and then there's other 120 million Adderall prescriptions, right? And it says on the box. Now, we don't know It's very hard to tell. It's hard to do studies. One is there was a law passed in 1997 and a policy adopted by NIH to not study the etiology or the origins of gun violence. So there's really almost no studies out there.
But so you're saying that the issue of gun violence is an issue of mental health and toxic
and
exposure.
Something else. It could be. Look, you just use your common sense.
But toxic exposure.
Maybe it's social media.
Yes.
Social media. It could be video games. It could be benzos. It could be SSRIs. Why aren't we studying these things?
All of it.
I mean, the Uvalde parents are suing a video game maker in response to this.
I think that's
I would say, to me,
just filed today.
the most likely, the thing that we should be studying is SSRIs, and nobody can really study it because of the HIPAA laws.
But
when there's these mass shootings occur, you never know if the guy was on SSRIs, and it's impossible to find out. But NIH could find out.
So I agree. I think probably we all agree on toxic exposure, drugs, benzos, SSRIs. All of these things are worrisome. But ultimately, for me, I lived in New Jersey, and we had a guy try to break in my house. I'm not allowed. They say I can have a gun. They made it as hard as possible for me to have a gun. The cops told me when they came to my house after I called the police, they said, if it were me, I'd have answered the door with a shotgun. And I said, oh, yeah, well, if I could get one. And so when I was finally able to get one, I was informed by the police that in New Jersey, you have a duty to retreat from your own home. So I'm in my own home in New Jersey. Someone breaks in with a gun and yells that they're going to kill me. I am legally required to seek exodus from my own home. And I asked the cop, I was like, where would I go? It's my house. And he goes, well, if you say that, you're telling the court you'd rather kill a man than stand outside in the cold, and they're going to put you in prison. I asked him, what would happen if someone broke into my house with intent to kill me and I defended myself with a weapon? He says, easy. You'd be arrested, charged with felony murder. You'd go to prison. You'd have your bail hearing. If you don't get it, you wait in jail until, you don't go to prison, you go to jail. You wait your hearing until you get your day in court with your affirmative defense of self-defense. Good luck with that. You had a woman who drove from PA into Jersey, an older middle-aged woman, going to Atlantic City, got pulled over, told the cop, this is a famous story in Jersey, that she was a law-abiding citizen, and she said, I just want to let you know that I have my gun on me. And he said, out of the car, you're under arrest, felony charge. I moved to West Virginia, constitutional carry. And, for me, and you know better than anyone, the threats that with crazy people who are trying to cause harm. So for me, I understand all this stuff about drugs and gun violence and mass shootings, but I won't tolerate, because of the escalation in crime and violence, me losing my right to defend myself and my family and my property.
Okay.
So my point ultimately is, outside of the issue of toxic exposure and shootings, what's your position on 2A, preserving gun rights? We've got
like I said, I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in the right to bear arms.
My argument then goes beyond and says we have to repeal the National Firearms Act, which and its add-ons. I believe it's unconstitutional. I can ask you a simple question right now. Actually, do you think private entities in the United States should have the right to own nuclear weapons?
No, but
they do. And this is something whenever I talk to anybody in office, they always say no, it should not be of the person. Or Lockheed Martin maintains and produces nuclear weapons. They're a private entity, and they do it internationally. So it's always been in the United States that there are privateers, there's corsairs, individuals were able to own warships. But while we have made many strides, like DC versus Heller, the right to keep and bear arms, we have these laws that restrict the individual while allowing these massive multinational warmonger corporations to have nukes. Why can't I have, look, I live in my house. I want a short-barreled rifle with a suppressor so that I'm less likely to cause harm to people, so that I can target only on those who are threatening my life. But it's damn near impossible because of the NFA for me to actually get a weapon that is appropriate, safer. So I'm curious, would you go beyond? Would you work to repeal these laws, or you keep it as is, or would you
repeal the NFA and red flag laws?
Enough about the NFA. So, and I'm not going to make a
fair point.
I'm not going to make a statement about something I know absolutely nothing about, and I would like to look. I would need to look at a lot of data and all that. Yeah. But
Mr. Kennedy, one of the things you mentioned, you were talking about SSRIs and mass shootings and stuff. Most of the time, when you're talking about mass shooting, or when mass shootings are discussed, in press or in the media, it's not the type of mass shooting that tends to come to mind when you hear the term. So anytime more than 2 people are shot, they consider that a mass shooting. But that could be someone, that could be drug violence, gang violence and stuff like that, which is different than the massacre type where you get someone with a rifle going into a school or something like that.
But he was referring to schools specifically. So
fair enough.
We can draw the distinction.
So I do think that whereas mass shootings as a concept is something that we have to worry about, but what do you think are the best policies to fix the I don't want to sound callous, but the everyday gun violence that we see, the stuff that happens daily in cities across the country? Because as much as the mass shootings that we see, the rifles and stuff like that, the schools, hospitals, whatever, they're horrifying and they're terrible and they get attention. The real death toll is the people that die every day in your violence in the cities. So what do you think? What would your plan be to combat that kind of stuff if there is a role for the federal government?
I mean, I'd love to hear what your solution is. My solution is good policing. I think we need to reduce the negative interactions between police and minorities, which is a big issue in this country, but we don't do that by defunding the police. We need a strong police force. The way that I would work it is that I would, the same way that I work schools and charter schools, is to give the police chiefs of these municipalities a lot of power, but also tremendous responsibility, so that if there are racial incidents while you are police chief, that you get 3 strikes and you're out, and you're banned from being a police chief in the next town. And so you give responsibility to them, but you also give the power to them to protect people but you hold them responsible. And I think that that's the way to clean up some of the problems in the police forces. But I would not do it by defunding the police.
Do you think our culture values police? That doesn't seem to me like a good idea from day one.
Yeah.
Do you think our culture values police, or do you think attitudes towards policing has declined since COVID and all the rioting over the summer?
Do I think what?
Our culture values police. Because we
cultural values?
Like, does our culture as Americans value police officers? Because you saw a backlash to the police, especially after George Floyd's death.
Well, I mean, I do. So, I grew up with, my father was the chief law enforcement officer in the land. I grew up with, a lot of affection for police and firefighters, and that was, that's my orientation. Oh, and a lot of my friends are cops, but I'm not blind to the fact that there are racial problems also in these. If you're a black kid, you're much more likely to get arrested, and I don't think that's right. So I think we have to try to fix that. What's wrong with the police? But we don't do that by making all police feel badly.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.